Hi guys, it's Ginger. I'm sure most of you know me pretty well. For those of you who don't, I'm Ginger. I like to cook things. I like to take other people's recipes, change them up, and make them my own. Tonight, I'm going to make what they call a tamale pie. I had a few things on the recipe that I didn't have. I did not have tomato sauce to make enchilada sauce with, so I took a can of tomatoes, pureed them, made my own, poured them back into the can. And then I took a hot skillet with about a fourth of a cup of oil, two tablespoons of flour, and a fourth of a cup of what they call Mexican chili powder. I didn't have Mexican chili powder, so I used half chili powder and half taco seasoning. I cooked it up until it browned just for a few minutes, like you would a normal roux. I slowly poured in the 1 can of tomato sauce that I had made. I added a fourth of a teaspoon of onion powder, a fourth of a teaspoon of garlic powder, and a fourth of a teaspoon of cumin. Stirred it up really well, let it cook for about 10 minutes till it thickened up just a little bit. Let it cool just a hair, poured it into this jar right here. So now I have homemade enchilada sauce. Now, with that being said, prep is key. Always know what you don't have, and what you don't have, you can always make. I did not have enchilada sauce, obviously. Now, with that being said, you want to preheat your oven to 400 degrees. Get you a nice, heavy cast iron skillet. Grease it. I use half butter and half olive oil. I'm going to put it in the oven to melt and stay for now because I like for my skillet to be hot enough that when I pour my cornbread batter into it, it'll slightly fry the edges good. Now, let's get started, I guess, on the Mexican cornbread bottom. Now, Mexican cornbread can be made a whole bunch of different ways. Really, it's nothing more than making cornbread and adding the things that you like to it. I, personally, I'm going to start with half a cup of cornmeal, 2/3 of a cup of all-purpose flour, and I forgot to grab a large bowl, so I'm going to do that really quick. Always mix your dry ingredients before you mix anything wet into them. So there's a half a cup cornmeal, 2/3 of a cup of flour. We're going to add about a teaspoon of salt. And about a teaspoon of baking powder. Maybe a teaspoon and a half, just to make sure it rises pretty good. So there's 1 and a half. We're going to get a whisk just to kind of make sure that everything gets mixed up pretty evenly here. Give that a stir. Now, wet ingredients. About a fourth of a cup of milk, 1 egg. I'm going to beat this egg into the milk just to save an extra amount of dishes to wash. Same whisk will do just fine. Just give that a mix. Simple trick. Use your whisk in between your hands like this. Works really well and really quick. Oh, let me sand this down just a hair. Okay. And you know what? Let's sweeten up this cornbread just a hair by adding, let's go with about a tablespoon of sugar. In fact, let's go 2 tablespoons because we're going to add some jalapenos and such to it in a few minutes. All right, 2 tablespoons of sugar. Let's grab a clean whisk again. Mix this together. Again, always keep your dry ingredients mixed before you add your wet. Okay, now, with that being said, we're going to mix in fact, let me get a bigger bowl because this is going to get a little bit large and in charge. All right, big bowl. We're going to first put in our dry ingredients. We're going to add some oil to the dry ingredients before we add the eggs and all. So I'm going to use olive oil. And to be exact, I think we should use, well, let's see, it calls for a couple of tablespoons. I'm going to use 3 or 4. I would like for it to be moist. So 1, 2, 3, 4 tablespoons of olive oil. We're going to mix that up just until it kind of gets a little crumbly looking, you know. That just kind of keeps things moist with the flour, doing nothing dry. There we go. It's going to resemble some crumbs. I don't know if you can see it or not, but it's going to be crumbly looking. Now, you can slowly pour in your wet mixture, which is your milk and your eggs. Okay. And anybody who's made cornbread before knows the consistency of cornbread. And it's a little thick, not exactly thin, but drops about like so, okay? Now, because this is a little thick, I'm going to use a little bit of the juice to some of the things I'm going to add to this cornbread. Number 1, diced jalapenos. I'm going to use about, I like jalapenos in mine, so I'm going to use, so 1 tablespoon, let's do 2 tablespoons of jalapenos. We're going to drain off 1 can of corn. You can use cream style corn, but preferably I like whole corn. Gives it just a little more texture, I think. Can of corn. And juice and all, 1 can of green chilies. And this is the small can, of course. I love green chilies, by the way. Okay. With that being said, we're going to mix it some more. Notice how it's loosening up just a bit, which is great, but not too much, which is even better. Now, there's one more vegetable I like to add to my Mexican cornbread. One moment. I absolutely love the sweet parts of a sweet bell pepper. So with that being said, find my handy dandy favorite knife, which, there it is. We're going to chop this sweet bell pepper up in the smallest chunks. However small you want them, really, it doesn't really matter. Again, texture is always a good thing when you're making Mexican cornbread. You kind of want to know what's in there, you know? You want to taste all of that good stuff. So let's go with about, I'd say a good 1/3 of a cup of red bell peppers chopped in the bowl. Now, with that being said, give it another stir. And voila, you have the makings of homemade Mexican cornbread mix. Now, I'm probably pretty sure that my pan's not quite hot as I'd like for it to be in here. Ooh, maybe it is. When you hear the butter and the oil mix and sizzle, it is. Stir around your oil though as much as you can around the edges, but it doesn't have to go all the way to the top, because when you pour your cornbread mix in here, what's on the sides, the butter and the oil, is going to rise up with it and cover what you're pouring in. So, one more stir, and let's dump this into the cast iron skillet that should be nice and hot. All right. Notice that I did not add salt and pepper. The reason for that is because the things that I'm going to add to the top of this, oh, hot, they are going to both have a lot of salt and pepper in them, and I don't want to over salt it. You can always add salt, you cannot take it away. All right, in the oven, 400 degrees, and you wait. Okay. Since this cornbread has a 20 to 25 minute timer on it, we're going to go ahead and get started on our tamale meat mix. With that being said, let's first take a small bowl, mix together our spices. That's going to be, let's do a teaspoon of cumin. Hopefully I haven't ran out. I use it a lot. 1 teaspoon of cumin. 1 teaspoon of chili powder. About 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt, which is that much or so. About 1/4 of a teaspoon of black pepper. Give that a little stir there. Seasoning mix, all mixed and ready to go. Okay. Now, I'm going to turn on the skillet and grab the hamburger meat. We've got just over a pound because just like everything I do, I'm overdo this as well. So we're going to ground up and cook this hamburger meat. I personally like to take a silicone rubber covered by the way, whisk to mash my meat with, to crumble it down just a little more than what it already is. So we'll get that cooking and browning. Now, personally, I like to add my spices to my ground meat while I'm cooking it. It just seems to infuse the flavor just a little bit more than adding it after it's already cooked. So, while this is cooking, I'm going to sprinkle on my cumin and garlic, my cumin and my chili powder mix so it can all kind of cook together. Okay. Alright, there's that. 25 minutes need to pass. And I only got about 10 minutes worth of hamburger meat cooking to go. So, I'm going to let the hamburger meat cook and do its thing. And we'll be right back after these messages. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back. And the hamburger meat is still cooking. The cornbread is still cooking. While that's happening, I'm going to do a couple of other small things. I'm going to take an onion, cut it in half, chop half, and put half of it on into my meat mixture. I like onions. I'm going to chop the other half in a little bit smaller dices and set it to the side. You'll see why in a few minutes. Alright. Now, I've got some white sharp cheddar. I'm going to go ahead and grate some of this. Be careful of your knuckles. You know how these graters can be. Here, just so you can see a little bit better of what I'm doing. Again, this is my very first video, so feel free to comment. And remember what I always say, be constructive, not destructive. I would love to hear what everyone has to say, their opinions, their thoughts, their ideas. But again, if it's negative, keep it to yourself. It's all a learning experience. You can't really mess up when it comes to good ingredients. You will get good food. Alright. There's, I'd say, about 2/3 of a cup of extra sharp white cheddar. I'm going to add just a large handful of bagged sharp cheddar as well. Set this to the side because we may use more because I really love the cheese. Okay. Everything's ready there. Let's give this meat a good stirring. Again, when you go to check your cornbread, make sure that when you poke a hole in the middle of it, being you use a knife or toothpick or any other instrument, that it comes out clean and dry. Nothing sticks to it. It's not moist. Make sure that your cornbread is cooked. You don't want to pour a bunch of stuff on your cornbread and then have it not cooked and everything turns mushy. That's not very fun or delicious or delightful to even look at. Okay. The meat is almost done. Let's check on the cornbread. Ooh, looking beautiful. With another 6 minutes left on the timer, I might add another 5 or 10 minutes to it. Just by looking at it, I can tell that it's not quite done. So we're going to give that a few more minutes. I think we've got everything else prepped for the rest of the dinner. Again, we'll be back after these messages. Okay, folks, back to business. Hamburger meat looks to be done. We're going to drain that off just to keep the extra grease out. So, oh no, leave it to me to make a mess. Draining hamburger meat. I believe the timer has gone off for the 25 minutes that I set for the cornbread. So I am going to set this aside to drain. And we're going to check on our cornbread. I use a butter knife just because it's just a little easier. Pull that out. Stick it right in the middle. It's still wet. We're going to put the cornbread back into the oven. And let's give it about another 10 minutes or so on the timer. Of course, now make a note that that moves the cooking time from the 25 minutes up to about 35 minutes. Again, this is all going to change according to how well your oven works. All ovens have different heating temperatures. Okay. Again, we're going to leave this to set. I believe we've got everything ready to complete our tamale so-called pie. We're going to give this timer 10 more minutes and we'll be back again in 2 and 2. Okay, so we're back, and as you can see, our 10-minute timer is up for the added minutes that I have put on the cornbread. While we do that, I think now would be a great time for a cup of caramel cappuccino. We'll pull out the cornbread, see how it's looking and doing. Oh, I can already tell just by looking that it's very likely done. Again, the knife test. Perfect, absolutely clean. While it's hot, we're going to take this enchilada sauce that we made, give it a little stir. We're going to pour a cup and a half right there. You know, good idea, by the way. How about we take a kebab stick and we're going to poke some holes in the cornbread, just random. I think I put about 25 holes into the cornbread. And we're going to pour this enchilada sauce right on top of the cornbread. Cup and a half. Alright. Give that a good shake just to make sure it's evened out a little. I'm going to take this drained hamburger meat, spread it out on top. There we go, just kind of give it a spread there so it's kind of all evened out. And remember the onions that I chopped from the other half of onion earlier. I'm going to take these raw onions and sprinkle those on top. Just because I like onions, you don't have to do the onions if you don't want to. With that being said, I'm pointing to my brother Casey and his lovely wife Betty, my BFF, who hates onions. You can omit the onions if you don't want the onions. Now, with that being said, we're going to take this cheese, and I'm going to take the orange first, sprinkle it on top. And see, I didn't think that would be enough. I want more. So I'm going to use just about enough to give the top of this pie a good cheesy topping all around. So far, this is what we're looking at. Okay, this is what you want it to look like so far. Now, we're going to take a piece of aluminum foil, just enough to cover the pan. Oh, let's not forget the white cheese. Take the white sharp cheddar cheese that we shredded earlier, add it to the top as well. Sure makes it look prettier. And who doesn't like cheese? The more cheese, the better, I'd say. All right. Now, take that piece of foil, drop your oven down to 350. Cover your pan so the cheese doesn't burn or scorch. We're going to put this back into the oven for about 10 minutes. I'll set the timer. Note to self, always set a timer. I'm one of those people who had to be, well, taught the hard way to use a timer because I thought I could get it timed right in my head. Apparently, I was wrong. So, timer, 10 minutes, back in the oven at 350 with the aluminum foil. Now, while that bakes, I'm going to put this to the side, kind of scoop up my mess a little bit. Okay. Take a really quick sip of this awesome caramel cappuccino. Thank you, Mommy, for my courage. Delicious. Okay. I've cleaned and chopped the ends off of 3 green onions. I'm going to chop those up however you like. I like to cut them diagonally because I like the way they look that way. Greens and all, the green part's what makes it look so pretty. Again, if you don't like onions, omit the onions. Don't chop your finger off. Alright. This is for topping. This is for the trash. Yay! 2 points. Okay, done with the cheese. There's the topping. When this comes out, you're going to let it cool just a little bit. We're going to sprinkle on these green onions. And I'm going to put some sour cream into a pastry bag. And I'm going to drizzle it across the top. But only after it cools off enough that the sour cream doesn't melt and look yucky. Then we'll put the foil back onto the pan, turn the oven off, put the pan back into the oven until it's ready to be eaten. I'll be back to show you the finished product as soon as it's done. Okay, so it looks like our timer's up. Let's pull it out, see how it looks. Oh, it's heavy. I'm going to take the foil off. Now, I'm going to do my best to show you how this looks so far. Hope you can see it. Nice and hot tamale pie. Now, I've given some thought to the toppings. I was going to put my green onions on and my sour cream, and I even chopped some tomatoes. The only thing I'm going to add to it while it's hot are the chopped tomatoes because they're just better warm and with the pie itself. So just kind of pour some tomatoes, some chopped tomatoes on, spread them out a little. We're going to turn the oven off, of course. Put a lid on the green onions. Save those for when we're ready to serve. Now, as far as the sour cream goes, again, I've decided to save that until ready to serve. Who wants warm sour cream? So, take a sandwich baggie. There you go. Put it into a cup like so it doesn't fall over. We're going to take this sour cream here and put a few big tablespoons, I guess it is, into the baggie. Because who doesn't love sour cream? Like so. Now, pull the baggie up, shake it all into the corner, let out as much air as possible, give it a nice twist at the top, and stick it back into the cup. Put this sour cream, these green onions, back into the refrigerator until ready to serve. When we're ready to serve, I'll sprinkle the green onions on the top. Cut the very tip off of your homemade pastry bag, and you can make beautiful, lovely, swirly designs however you'd like on top. Cut it and serve. And when that time comes, I'll post a picture of the finished product. I hope you enjoyed my very first video of my very first homemade recipe that changes as I go. For the full recipe, send me a message. I will try to remember what I did and write it all down for you. Thanks, and again, wish me luck. Y'all have a good dinner.